My name is Jim Worthen. We're here on Channel 17 every Monday at 2 o'clock, Wednesday at 5 o'clock, and Friday at 7 o'clock. But as my sainted brother, who was a kind of a jazzophile, would say, that's just the first verse. The best place to see us and to tell your friends who, like my guests today, aren't on the South Coast. They go to TV Santa Barbara, TVSB website. Then they go to the demand side and they search Worthen One-on-One, and we'll be the top show there, except for some reason you have to go all the way to the bottom through 5 or 10 other shows, and they say it's because it's alphabetical, but I know the alphabet, and Worthen doesn't have to be last. There might be a zebra show or so. Anyway, you can go to YouTube and search Worthen One-on-One, and we're right there. And as my granddaughter says, Dad, do you know that you're going to be there forever? And I said, what does that mean? She says, well, it means 200 years from now, your great-great-granddaughter will be just as embarrassed as I am. So, you can't win anything, can you? The show today is fun, but very educational. It's about a very serious problem that started with the German, I'll have our guests say something dialectic materialism way back in the 1840s. And we're fighting that today more than probably ever. And our guest has been very potent in his fight against it in his area. Chris Arend. Did I say it right, Chris?
Arend, like the type of thing you run, running an errand, Chris Arend.
Chris Honeydew. No, Arend.
Arend. We'll leave the other one for my wife.
So, Chris, every show starts out with, where were you born, Chris? Confuses people named James, but where were you born?
In San Diego, down in San Diego, a while back.
And what did your parents do? What were they like?
Well, Dad was, after World War II, he studied biology, became a wildlife biologist, joined the Fish and Game, and then became an independent wildlife consultant in 1960. He couldn't stand the bureaucracy in the Fish and Game, and he started advising gun clubs on how to attract ducks and geese.
Ducks Unlimited?
Yes. Matter of fact, he was president of Ducks Unlimited back in the 60s. And I asked him once, why did you like ducks so much? He said, because they're cute. So.
And they reproduce, and you can can kill them, and there'll be more of them.
Yes, and you have to harvest them. And my mother, who's still with us now at age 102. She's originally from a city that used to be called Lemberg, and then when she was born it was called Lvov in Poland, and now everyone knows it. It's Lviv in western Ukraine.
Wow.
And she came over here in 1938 and was a housewife, mother, worked in a furniture store for a long time, and raised me and my sister, and is still doing well.
1938, the Ukraine, Poland. Why did she leave there?
Well, her parents, who were Jewish, both of them doctors, they felt that things might get a little bit dicey with the Germans, and she had an opportunity to visit an aunt in the United States in Chicago, and so they sent her out. They could have sent her younger brother out, but they didn't because they thought, long trip by boat and so on, it'd be a little bit too rough on him. Her parents and brother never made it out.
Oh. The history of the Holocaust is filled of stories like that, of part of a family getting away, usually a young person that was sent away. And It's just unbelievable. We had a great guy here, Eldon Haskell, who was a retired, I think Brigadier General by the time he retired in construction, and he was the military governor of Nuremberg. Mm-hmm. And he marched the citizens of Nuremberg through the was it Auschwitz or whatever the
one of the camps.
Yeah.
There were lots of camps in those.
And he
years.
made every citizen go through and see what was going on, as if they didn't know.
Yeah, they've got a good scene like that in the series Band of Brothers at the end of the series.
Yeah. So your mother became a mother.
Yeah.
And how did she meet your father?
They met at the Chicago Art Institute. He was taking some classes there. She was taking some classes. This would have been 1939 or 40. And it was before the war broke out. And then Pearl Harbor happened, and Dad was feeling very patriotic. And early 1942, he went off to serve in the South Pacific.
Yeah. Not many people waited for the draft.
No. A lot of guys signed up right away.
Yeah. My dad tried to. He'd been a sergeant in the First World War, been gassed, but they held it against him that he had a little infant son, and so they wouldn't allow him to join. Besides the fact he was almost 50.
Sure.
But it was a different era, and yet I think if we were under the same kind of attack today, we'd be surprised how wonkism would die and how people would.
I think people would stand in line again if we had to do that situation. We experienced that a bit after 9/11. Actually, a lot after 9/11. A lot of young men. I met a soldier over there when I was living in Germany after 9/11. A young American who had been studying biochemistry, and he. Right after 9/11, he broke off his studies and joined the Army.
Yeah. So you, where did you go to school? Your parents were in Chicago?
They came out to California before I was born. As I say, I was born in San Diego, and I attended school, elementary school, high school in Novato in Marin County, the northern end of Marin County there.
Not private schools?
No. No private schools, no.
And after high school?
I went to junior college, couldn't afford a four-year institution, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do either, so I did junior college for a year and a half, and then went to the U.S. Army. Best decision I think I ever made as a young man. I enlisted for an extra year. We had the draft in those days, but I enlisted for an extra year to get training in German as a foreign language, and I became an interpreter and translator in the U.S. Army. That was what they called a secondary MOS. My first job, they took those of us from language school who were over 5'9", weren't colorblind, and they made us MPs. And so I served then a total of 3 years in the Army, about 2 years of that in Germany. And one thing led to another, and I sort of stayed on in Germany for most of the duration. So it was in most of my adult life.
So what part of Germany?
Mostly the Frankfurt area, the central area there.
Yeah, I get an argument with my Navy friends who say, well, I was an MP. I said, no, there were no MPs in the Navy. They just would say, on this day, you're not going on liberty, you're an MP.
Yeah, they called them, I think, shore patrols.
But it was a real police force in the Army.
Yeah, it's a real police force, and I was in a specialized unit that did liaison work with German customs to stop black market activities. There was a lot of black market in those days, selling tax-free cigarettes, tax-free liquor.
The wall was still up?
Oh, the wall was definitely up. Yes, the wall was definitely up. I learned to despise the wall. I went over a couple times to Berlin, had some contact with East German intelligence as a civilian over there. It was kind of weird. And I really enjoyed the party when the wall came down in 1989. I drove out to the border there and got into the biggest traffic jam I've ever been in, with cars coming in and out of East Germany there, and people from the local villages grilling bratwurst on the side of the freeway there, the side of the Autobahn. It was fantastic.
They all kind of loved Americans too, didn't they?
Pretty much so. Pretty much so. Pretty much so. The left wing over there wasn't always so thrilled. You know, we had when we were talking about medium range nuclear weapons and so on. The left wing was not so good, and there were certain West Germans who were trained in East Germany to raise hell in West Germany.
Yeah. What's it called? A second guard or a
well, fifth column
fifth
is
column.
a good way of phrasing it.
I was off both a number
Yeah,
and
but that's the phrase. Yeah, they had people over there. I had one run-in with the East German trained communists at the German university where I studied, and I learned a lot about the communists and how they work back then.
So you muster out. You're going to school in in Germany.
Well, I got out of the Army, I was about one quarter or so shy of getting my bachelor's degree in political science at UC Berkeley before going on to study law. By that time, I decided what I wanted to do in life was become a lawyer. And then one thing led to another. I applied to German law school. My first wife was kind of instrumental in that. And I found out that I loved German law. I went over there. I thought it would be like paper chase.
Wait, you went to German law school before you went to...
I went to German law school first. And German law school was a lot tougher than American law school, I can tell you. The German law is, I've often compared it to American law is like driving a Pinto, German law is like driving a Porsche. But that's a topic for another discussion probably.
Well, German law is judicial rather than the common law like in the United States.
Well, German law has, it's based on statute, but the statutes are the result of a great deal of legal philosophy going in there, a lot of Roman legal concepts incorporated into German law. It's a very logical, rational system. You don't have juries, so you don't play to emotion. Judges are very sober, at least when they're sitting in trial, not always afterwards. But it's a different system geared towards applying the law logically, as rationally as you can, and leaving as much emotion out of it as possible.
You'd graduated from Berkeley.
I graduated from German law school, took my first 8 bar exams. Then I applied to American law school, went to UC Berkeley Law School. They decided I didn't need a bachelor's degree to get in. The German law degree was sufficient. And over there they grade the bar exams, and I did very well on my first 8 bar exams. And a couple of professors there at UC Berkeley knew what that meant. Then I only had to do 2 years of American law school, got my JD degree, and then I had the choice of either going to work for a large corporate law firm or going back to Germany again to do the clerkship
you
period.
Passed the bar the first time here?
Oh yeah, that was...
Well, some people take 3 or 4.
I think our vice president, for instance, she had to take a second run at it.
Yeah, well, I guess she couldn't sleep. I'm sorry, with the graders, like...
I have no way, we don't want to go there. Yeah, but then I went back there, did the clerkship period, which was a great deal of both academic training and practical training in the civil courts.
How was your first wife German?
She was German, right, and have 2 children by her who are now a lot older, and my daughter's given me 2 grandsons in the meantime. And then, I passed the second state bar exams over there, thought then I might probably come back to the United States to practice law. Got fed up with practicing law over here. A lot of the shenanigans that were going on. I was in a New York corporate firm at the time. And then a German firm recruited me, and I went back to Germany in 1985, and I practiced law over there as a full-fledged member of the German bar until the end of 2004, when homesickness, etc., drove me back to the United States, back to California with my second wife, who's also from Germany.
And what are your daughters to now?
Well, my son is over in Germany, resides there, and
He's from the second marriage.
from first marriage,
Oh.
and still single and keep on hoping. My daughter is married to a warrant officer in the U.S. Army, and they now live in near Fort Gordon, Georgia.
So, where did you meet your second wife?
Also in Germany.
German or an American?
German, and we have a son who is now 19 years old and a freshman at Cal Poly.
Oh, home commuting at least with his.
No, he's living on campus.
No, it was at least with his laundry.
Yes, that seems to be common practice. Big bag of laundry about every 2 weeks or so. Yeah.
And he doesn't admit that it's easier for mom and you to help out, or that he needs more quarters on campus.
Well, he's next year he's in a little apartment. I think in the first year they had to live on campus there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What's he majoring in?
He's changing. He was anthropology. I think now he's moving to psychology or something like that. He still has to figure out what he wants to do in life.
Yeah, so do I. Sooner or later,
Yeah.
I'll figure out what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
I tell people that two things. I'm immature, and I always will be. And they ask, when are you going to retire? And I say, you'll know. And they say, how will that be? I say, you'll be shoveling dirt in my face.
Yeah.
And never going to retire.
No, I still work today, not in the legal profession anymore. I came back to the States, and I had a lot of acquaintances, friends in Germany who asked me to start doing translation. I found out that I'm very good at and very fast at doing translations of German legal documents into English. And I can make more money doing that than practicing law.
All right.
Here.
When you came back here originally, did you go to the Bay Area?
No, I settled in San Luis Obispo County. I had a friend who had sold me on there. I wanted to live more country.
2004,
to end of 2004, very end of 2004. I wanted to. My wife and I we love horses, and we wanted to be a little bit out in the country. And by that time, the town of Novato, where I grew up, and the freeway used to stop and have kids on bareback waiting to cross on horse there at the street light. That long gone. It's all suburbia. Owning horses up in that area just completely impossible. But I had a friend who introduced me to the area here, and I thought I'd set a law practice in San Luis Obispo, but as it turned out, I had these friends asking me to do translations, and I was very grateful for that. Keeps me in touch with Germany, in touch with German law.
And
enjoy it.
control of your time.
Yes, I have. This is mostly the case in the legal profession. The clients have control of my time, but I have some freedom, and I can take my work with me. I travel I can go on ski vacation. I just work during the night and ski during the day.
Where do you ski?
Tahoe, and I love Colorado and Park City, Utah. I've skied also in the Alps. I learned late to ski. I started skiing at age 38.
Yes.
And been enjoying it ever since.
Yeah, I once went to Mammoth at 38, and after waiting in line for almost an hour to get on I then went to Squaw, North Star, Diamond, mainly northern Tahoe, where there were 11 in Tahoe, 11 ski resorts. You didn't have to wait for hours to get on the slope.
Oh, yeah. That's annoying when you've got to stand in line for so long.
Yeah. So, 2004, when you moved back, you already had your son.
Yeah,
and
he had just been born. He was about a year old.
Did you move to the same place you are today?
Well, we first moved to Morro Bay to see if we wanted to live in the area. Lived in a rental there for about a year, and then bought a house up in the North County in Heritage Ranch, where we got some horses and goats and a goose, dogs and cats, and lots of critters.
Why goats?
Because they're so cute. They're beautiful.
Okay.
They're sweet. They're absolutely lovely creatures.
I know. I was raised on goat milk, and when my son was born, he rejected his mother, and he rejected formula. Lost 2 pounds in the first 3 weeks. So we got a nanny, and he for the next 3 years of his life, had goat milk, and it was healthy as could be.
See, now that's the solution to the baby formula issue we're having now.
That's
huh?
right.
More goats, more
Yeah,
goats.
right. And also, they take care of the brush and keep the fires away.
Yeah.
So you begin to get involved in the community. Some people say politics, but that's a form of getting involved in the community.
I became a member of the Republican Central Committee after a little while. I've always been interested in politics, like most lawyers. A lot of lawyers are interested in politics, not necessarily having a political career, but it goes with the territory, so to say. And I got involved there, and then I was asked back in something like 2010 to run for the school board because we were having some problems in the school district. At the time I decided not to run then because my son was at a parochial school. Didn't think it would look quite right. The lady who had asked me to run then, she asked me again in 2018.
I want to interrupt you. Yeah. Tell me why he was in a parochial school.
Because that's where my wife wanted him. And it's a very
Protestant,
school.
Catholic?
No, it's just she liked the academic environment at the parochial school. That was it. They do a good job. They do a good job.
Here on the South Coast, we have Bishop Diego, and we have a very vibrant Protestant school, and people who want their children to get the right kind of education and can figure a way to do it either by scholarship or their own wealth. Avoid public education.
She like that. I grew up in the public school system. I would have been fine with him in the public schools, but at any rate, then he graduated. He went on to high school, and about that time, I think it was his first year in high school, the lady who had asked me before to run for school board, she asked me again to run for school board because our school district was in a real mess. We had a young superintendent. It was his first job as a superintendent. He had overspent. The school district was going bankrupt. It was a mess.
So it wasn't curriculum or performance, it was mismanagement?
There was absolute mismanagement in about every way, shape, and form you can think in the school district under that superintendent. I was elected in November 2018. I was expecting that I'd be working with that superintendent, trying to get things back on track. He realized, I think, that a couple of new school board members would not tolerate the type of garbage that had been going on, and he blindsided us by resigning very quickly.
Again, it wasn't over curriculum; it was over management.
It was
that
management,
he saw
finances,
it was coming.
I think he saw the writing on the wall. I think he realized he didn't have what it took to handle the crisis.
Had they tried some bond issues or anything that got...
They had done a bond. He had sold a good bond issue up there. He had sold a good bond issue that we are working on now because some of our schools were in bad shape. They needed to be renovated, torn down and rebuilt. That's the project's going along fine. We had some other issues going on there. His management style was very, let's call it authoritarian.
Losing some maintenance and other staff.
He lost some important people there, fast turnover in chief business officers and stuff like that, which contributed to the problem. With help from the county, after he resigned, we had an interim superintendent, retired former superintendent Julian Crocker, who was an excellent man. We had him for 6 months, and then we hired our current superintendent, Kurt DeBost, who's been doing a fantastic job. We made the decisions in the school board that had to be made to cut spending. Some of it was a little bit tough. Cutting spending means cutting jobs in the school business. But we got things turned around, and then we got hit with COVID and have managed to go through there. We were I think the first school district in our county to open up again for in-person instruction at the elementary schools. We were very aggressive on trying to open as early as possible. As a matter of fact, about 2 weeks before Governor Newsom lifted the mask mandate, we had just gotten so fed up with the thing in our school district. We just decided we're not going to enforce any mask mandate anymore. And we resolved to get rid of the mask mandate in our schools.
I'm going to hit you with a nexus that I don't think everybody understands, but Paso Robles is a nexus of drug trade from the Central Valley to 101, and
there's some traffic going on there. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does that influence your schools, or is it more
We have
transient?
it's more passing through. We have a bit of a problem there. We know that gangs want to move into the area, but our police department is wise to their ambitions. Our county is under Sheriff Ian Parkinson is very wise to those ambitions. So the problem is not too great there. We don't have gangs shooting it out in high noon in the streets, but we have some problems there. Fortunately, not too much in the school.
Well, your county is, knowing the Board of Supervisors, has always been a middle right in management and in election. It's never been like our county, 4 people from the same party.
No, our county is not at all like Santa Barbara County of the politics.
Well, that influences, a lot of people don't realize this. In fact, I think Mike Stoker 20 years ago taught me this. The county is not a separate political entity. It is a division of the state.
That's right.
Everything in the Board of Supervisors, all the different office holders you'll find are similar, except for when they do some election controls and reapportionment. Sheriffs, DAs, superintendents of public instruction, they're all the same in every county in the state except San Francisco City County, which is
they're sort of a unique situation there. But in effect, we're all state officials. We are all subordinated to the state government. It's the same with the school districts. We are subdivisions. We're given a certain amount of autonomy. If we lose control of our finances, the state comes in and takes over. So it's we're of course governed by the education code.
Yeah.
So we have to follow California law, of course.
And 10 years ago, when the state needed money, they took money from the counties.
The state giveth, the state taketh.
So you're straightening out the district. You're one of 5 members on your...
We're 7. We have a 7-member school board there. The suggestion was made to reduce the number to 5. We have our territory is fairly large because a lot of the surrounding country, it's not just the city of Paso Robles, it's the countryside around it. For instance, I live about 13 miles out of the city, but I'm part of the Paso Robles Joint Unified School District out
So
there.
you have not 1 or 2 big schools, you have several schools?
We have, 6 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and our high school. Total of about 6,500 students in the district. Plus we have the ancillary operations, continuation school that does very good work. Our Liberty High School, it's called, an independent study we do. So we've got a full range of services, and we've been hit with learning loss as a result of COVID, but we've been making recovery, and we have a top team of administrators there and educators. They know their business, and we're recovering from a lot of the learning loss.
Unlike, for instance, and you may not be fully aware of this, we've just had the state of the Santa Barbara School District, and the superintendent went through all the wonderful things, never mentioned learning loss, never mentioned grades, never mentioned even the mental suicides or anything like that. And it shocked me. It was all how wonderful the teachers were doing.
Yeah, that's. I'm aware of some of the problems in the schools in Santa Barbara County, and I've followed some of the stories down here of having to do with critical race theory, which we'll be discussing. I am grateful that we're operating differently in our school district.
I'm going to go way back rather than take
Sure.
you to what you've done about critical race theory. What is it? Where did it start historically?
Well, let's give you the brief, couple minute summary.
Well, we have 25 minutes, so don't be too brief.
Critical race theory, not critical race thinking. It's a big, and you have to understand the difference between critical thinking, Socrates, rational thought, evidence-based argument, and so on.
Logic.
That too, all of that. The scientific method, that all fits under the heading critical thinking. Then we have so-called critical theory. Now, critical theory, you can basically trace it back to a German philosopher named Hegel, who around 1800, I think perhaps by looking at the legal system, where he developed the concept of thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis. You have two sides of an issue, they come together, they debate, and you look for where, much as in algebra, the intersecting sets of numbers, the intersecting circles, and in the middle you will find truth. And that we use that in law, of course, two sides, plaintiff, defendant, and it works fine in that type of a setting. He came up with that as a general approach to finding truth. After Hegel, there was a fellow named Karl Marx, and he developed, as you'd mentioned before, dialectic materialism. He applied this splitting an issue into two sides. He applied it to all of society, and he looked at the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, all right, the working class and the capitalist class. And it all has to do with dividing society into two groups, the oppressed and the oppressors. In those days, it didn't make any sense. Society is much more complex than just having two sides. But that's the way the dialectic method works, split it into two camps. After Karl Marx, he thought it would lead to the Great Revolution, this conflict between the working class and the capitalist class. It didn't happen. Where did the Communist Revolution take place? It took place in a feudal society, Russia. A bunch of philosophers, more German philosophers, lots of German philosophers in this history, they developed the so-called Frankfurt School in the 1920s to look what went wrong. How can we keep this baby going?
After the First World War.
Right after the First World War. It was financed by the son of a rich industrialist, German industrialist. He financed the Frankfurt School, and it actually still exists today. The building's still there at the university, and it's no longer so much focusing on dialectic anymore.
What university?
University of Frankfurt, the Johannes Gutenberg, that's the one I studied at, the Wolfgang von Goethe University there in Frankfurt. Then the Nazis came along, the guys at the Institute skedaddled to the four winds, they had to. One of their fellows was Herbert Marcuse, who came to the United States along with a couple of other members of the Frankfurt School. They were welcomed to Columbia. The Ivy League schools liked them a lot. And Herbert Marcuse, he stayed on, especially in California, and they continued this idea of divide society into two groups and analyze it that way. That was picked up then in about late 1960s, early 1970s by a then retired professor at Harvard, a guy named Derek Bell. And he and a small group of students, African American students, were wondering, well, we've now had all the civil rights legislation, and black people are still way down the line as far as socioeconomic status goes. There are all sorts of socioeconomic discrepancies or disparities, and the great glorious equality hasn't happened yet. What's the reason? And they developed a concept called critical legal studies, which morphed into critical race theory. And again, mostly in law schools, it's spread there, and it went from one law school to the next, spread around. Then, like a virus, it spread into the social sciences, and now it is everywhere. They had the first, I think, the first convention on critical race theory was back in 1989, but since then it has spread, and it now dominates really the social sciences in academia.
Now, you were saying McCuskey and the Bell looked at the civil rights movement in 1960 and wondered why blacks were left so far behind.
Yeah, after the civil rights legislation had happened, why is everything behind? Are blacks still lagging? And they said it must be because of institutional racism, systemic racism. They came up with various terms for it. And
did anyone, and this may be out of our bailiwick, say, wait, we just, the civil rights movement's great, but we just destroyed the black society, their businesses?
No, that wasn't really the focus of the attention of this.
They ignored that.
they looked. They're academicians. They looked at. They applied theory. They applied critical theory. As I say, it became then critical race theory. They ended up dividing society along the lines of race into two camps: the oppressor and the oppressed. And now you're either on the oppressor side, and this is where it gets really weird in critical race theory. You're on the oppressor side if you have a pale complexion. If you're white, you're on the oppressor side. And if you're on the, if you're a so-called person of color, you're on the oppressed side. And they also, about this time, 1970, the definition of racism in academia was modified. It used to be racism was just defined as racial prejudice. Then a socio-psychologist, whatever that is, 1970, she came up with the idea, actually racism, you have to have power in order to be a racist, to really live out your dream as a racist. So power became the determinative criterion, with the result that you have many people nowadays who say a person of color cannot be racist. By definition, they cannot be racist. They might be prejudiced, but they cannot be racist.
Even if they're a capitalist?
It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's skin color is determinative in critical race theory. Unless I guess you're a conservative Republican, happen to be black then, and well, maybe you're a traitor to your people. Critical race theory is, they get pretty strange. And then they also decided that all whites are inherently racist because you're part of the power structure by virtue of complexion. It doesn't matter if you're a poor dirt farmer someplace or whatever your position or how long you've been in the country. I've often wondered, my wife, who's from Germany, when did she become a racist?
How many slaves did she own?
Was it when she came visited the United States for the first time, when she married me, when she applied for citizenship, when she became a citizen? I don't know. But you have people out there who say, such as the author of this book, White Fragility, they say things, you will always be racist. Your parents could not have been anti-racist. Your parents were racist. They could not have taught you not to be a racist. It is just filled with generational guilt and collective guilt for something that happened generations in the past. I mean, this is half a dozen generations back is when slavery was abolished, probably more than half a dozen generations, depending on how long you count a generation.
Well, this flies in the face of the real civil rights movement and the real leader of the civil rights.
That's exactly now in our school district, at the beginning of the last calendar year, it was all the rage in California. School districts were passing anti-racism resolutions right and left. And they had a lot of CRT garbage in there, the typical verbiage. Our school administrators thought, because we'd had members of the community urging us to do it, they presented us with a draft. They said, we watered it down a bit from other resolutions and passed around. I looked at it and said, not just no, I said, hell no, we're not going to do that. I'm going to write a resolution condemning racism because I absolutely abhor racism for what we just talked about, my family background. And I started our resolution off with that famous sentence from Martin Luther King from his I Have a Dream speech, that he has a dream that one day his children will be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And we fashioned our resolution condemning racism. We don't use the phrase anti-racism because that phrase has now been co-opted by the radical left, by, for instance, this guy, Ibram X. Kendi, who wrote a book called How to Be an Anti-Racist. And I mean, you read that thing, it is just trash. It is trite and trash, and it is, I mean, when he writes in there how after the 2020, or rather the 2000 election, when the Supreme Court issued its decision there, he writes in there, virtually, actual quote now, and that's when I learned how to hate white people. I mean, and this is now a star in the critical race theory movement. They go out there and they sell this division, they sell this hate, they make a lot of money at it. That's why I have been giving lectures a lot up and down the state now on the critical race theory scam. And it is a scam. They are making a mint off that stuff. He can get $20,000 for a 1-hour Zoom meeting with a school board. It was Fairfax County. He got that type of money a few years back. His book has made him a lot of money. Beverly, what's her name? Robin DiAngelo, the author of White Fragility. She gets, I checked this out about 2 years ago, about $30,000 a pop for selling absolution to corporations.
So that's
absolving them of their sin. There's a lot of money involved in this stuff.
That's sort of like what the Black Lives Matter Corp, the Black Lives Matter institution, not the movement and the love we all have for life, is doing.
The Black Lives Matter organization, I think they're going to have, I think they jumped the shark on cashing in on this thing. They are having some investigations going against them, and their multi-million-dollar homes that have been purchased and so on. But it is a big racket, and you've got it in Santa Barbara County in your schools. I know you've got this issue here where there are all sorts of consulting, race relations consulting firms out there that charge an arm and a leg, and they get hired by school districts, often probably giving some contributions to candidates for school boards. I wouldn't doubt that plays a role there. But they get retained by school districts to provide consulting services on race relations, and they charge an arm and a leg. They charge more than I charged as a corporate lawyer.
Well, sadly to say, our focus is race, but same thing's true of all sorts of things, like an ex-assemblyman, senator, has a consulting firm in Sacramento. He was, in fact, I think, Jack O'Connell, and he's on a retainer. It's not a big amount, it's just $3,000 a month, but money's being funneled from the taxpayer to his organization.
That's right. That happens. That this scam that now it's in the meantime. I think the critical race theory industry has become a multi-billion-dollar burden, frankly, on the economy, on our society. Every university has their diversity specialists. Every university has its critical race theory courses, or courses that are similar to critical race theory. Corporations, I saw there's something like half the top 500 corporations have got diversity officers who make really good money, not even without counting their stock options and everything else. And you try to figure out, what do they do? What do they really do? They generate a lot of paperwork, they write tons of stuff, and they're not solving the real socioeconomic problems that are causing these disparities we have. We all know, for instance, if you look at the inner cities, we know what the problems are in the inner cities, where especially in the minority populations in the inner cities, crime, drugs, families destroyed, those are the real problems. But critical race theory distracts from the real causes. And it says the real problem is racism. And how do we deal with it? Instead of tackling the root causes of these problems, they tackle the appearances, the symptoms. I'll give you a little sample out of Seattle. They've actually got two good examples out of there. Seattle had a problem. They said, we're disproportionately citing people of color for not wearing their bicycle helmets. They looked at the statistics. People of color make up this percentage of our city population, but they're getting more than their share of tickets for not wearing their bicycle helmets. So what do? Do we educate them maybe, hey guys, there's a good reason for wearing a bicycle helmet because it keeps your head from splitting open when you hit the ground? No, they got rid of the regulation. They got rid of the ordinance, right? No problem. We get rid of the socioeconomic discrepancy there. We simply get rid of the ordinance. They had a problem there.
Well, let me ask about that. They never asked those who weren't wearing helmets why. Maybe they needed financial assistance to buy helmets. Maybe they just were freedom-loving people who weren't going to wear helmets.
I don't know the details. I know that the solution was they just got rid of the ordinance. They had a situation with fare jumping on the Seattle, their public transit system. And they found that black residents of Seattle were getting cited disproportionate to their portion of the population, were getting cited for fare jumping, for riding without paying. So what did they do? They stopped enforcing it altogether, with the result that I think the statistic I saw in a recent report was about 17% of the passengers are actually paying. The rest aren't paying, and the result is that they've got many millions of many millions big in their budget at the metro system there. Here's an example from the education business. Mayor de Blasio, one of his last things after they found out that Asians were disproportionately represented in the advanced placement courses there, they called it, I think it was the Talented and Gifted program. Asians were disproportionately participating there. What did Mayor de Blasio do to solve that socioeconomic discrepancy? Let's get rid of the Talented and Gifted program. They've done that down in San Diego. Get rid of advanced placement courses at their largest high school down there. There have been proposals at the state level to get rid of advanced placement courses because they are disproportionately occupied by people, mostly by Asians, and it's crazy. Let's cover up the problem. Let's not address the root causes. Let's lower everybody to the lowest common denominator.
Oh, that's called equity.
That becomes equity. That's right. And just the fact that they take the term and call it equity frustrates me no end, because equity is a very good term and we use it in the law. In the law, as opposed to damages, we had the courts of equity, the system of equity, you could get injunctive relief and that type of stuff. Now equity has been turned into, let's make everybody the same. Let's even everything out, no matter how we do it. Let's get the big socioeconomic statistics identical, regardless how we do it. Let's cover up the problem instead of going to the root causes of the problems. It's insane.
I have a terrible thought. You can slap my face for it, but equity would mean that 100 IQ was what ran the world. And therefore,
sort of.
Therefore, you wouldn't look to those with higher IQs who are producing and helping those of all people.
It's a crazy concept, the way it's implemented. And you notice that they take the term and they take a perfectly good word and they distort the meaning, just like they've done with the term anti-racism. Actually, anti-racism, I am certainly an anti-racist. I despise racism. I think racism is a sign of boneheaded stupidity, because you're prejudging somebody based on their complexion. How stupid can you be? But now anti-racism has been distorted. It's been given this radical meaning. The term equity, they love to come up also with pseudo-intellectual terms. Intersectionality. Oh, we all have heard that term, right?
Yeah.
Intersectionality. supposed to be one of the great intellectual achievements in the field. They're in the legal field.
Define it.
Well, what it simply means is that people have different characteristics, and you can group them differently. The basic idea of intersectionality is an individual can have different loyalties to different groups. For instance,
within that one person,
you can be. An example would be a black, gay, disabled person. It checks off three boxes. Let's take a mixed race person, maybe black, Hispanic, mixed parentage. That ticks off two boxes. And the idea is to build in the ideology of this critical race theory, and it is an ideology, it is not a methodology. It is not a method for looking at history at all. It is a strict ideology. It's a way of getting allies, trying to get allies in. So, of course, the reason is because every individual you can classify in various groups. You could classify us as sort of senior citizens, just barely, for instance, right, as one group, and then what else? Maybe, in my case, a veteran, for instance. That's often a group that is looked at as, oh, they need special treatment. Various things. Everybody fits into various categories. This is not a great intellectual achievement. The only thing that Evelyn Crenshaw, the professor of law down at UC LA, when she developed this concept, the only thing that she really developed was a new term for something that is self-evident. It's so obvious, and it's really so unimportant. But that's the way one of the things they like to talk about, and they get their allies together, and it sounds so intellectual, so smart.
Well, I've always objected to the elites coming up with a conclusion out of feelings rather than fact.
Oh, yeah.
And it sounds like critical race theory is maybe not the elites, but the pseudo-intellectual left coming up with that kind of...
It started off, as I say, almost as a virus, and it started off mostly among black students, black professors at law schools, and then spread from there to the social sciences. When I wrote an article a while back on called The Myth of Systemic Racism, I was looking through various sources. I found one law review article from 1998 that was critical of critical race theory. I could only find one article. I contacted the professor to ask for permission to use his article. He was very generous, said I could do it, spread it around, and so on. And he told me he had submitted that article to 66, I remember that number, 66 different law reviews, and only one was willing to even consider it, and they published it. But the rest, nope. And then you had, of course, at the universities and the social studies departments, if the critical race theory was spreading in the black studies department, other professors, although they might, from other parts of the social sciences, might have had some criticism to exercise, but first, they weren't really paying much attention to it. Second of all, they were afraid of being called racists.
Yeah.
If you criticize critical race theory and these glorious achievements of these people who are in themselves absolute racists because they judge everybody, they pigeonhole us all on the basis of our complexions.
True racists.
They are true racists.
And we need to move on to what you did in the school,
Sure.
But one of the sad scenarios of the true racists is that the attack on the Orientals in our society, the violent attack, wasn't because a president called it the Wuhan Chinese virus. It was black racism against Orientals.
There's been a lot of that, and you will notice in the press, they rarely mention the race of an attacker. They rarely do, but it has mostly been...
the FBI said 78% of the Chinese that have been attacked or were attacked by young black men. Again,
That's right.
Not the black race, but a certain category of criminals.
Groups there. Look, most people in all races are just fine folks and so on. It's the idiots out there. And there are idiots and racists in all races.
We need to move quickly to
Sure.
what you did.
Well, in Paso Robles then, we adopted a ethnic studies course. That was the next big issue we had to deal with. I made sure I supported it, provided it did not have any critical race theory in it, did not have hindsight bias, did not say George Washington was an evil guy because he had slaves just like 99% of the world at the rest of the time and so on. Then after that, as the critical race theory issue became rather prevalent in some school districts on the East Coast, the lady who had asked me to run for school board, in the meantime had herself been elected to the school board, she said, maybe we should ban critical race theory in our schools. I said, that's an excellent idea. I'll draft a resolution. So I wrote the resolution that banned critical race theory in our schools in Paso Robles. We had 3 meetings in which we discussed the issue, lots of public comment, and then we passed the resolution.
Now, my understanding is you have a 7-member board,
Yeah.
and the vote was 4-3?
I think it was 4-3
Yeah,
to
but
ban critical race theory.
the
Yeah,
3
that's-
people who didn't vote to ban it were against it anyway. They just didn't.
They didn't want to go that far. They
Yeah.
didn't. They all 3 said in our deliberations that they did not believe that it had any place in our schools, but they didn't want to go to the point of banning it. Now, when we banned it, you can't just pass a ban and say, we hereby ban critical race theory. You have to define it. And so in our resolution, we took the main premises and the main teachings of critical race theory, and we said, you cannot teach this to our kids. You cannot teach to our kids that a person is morally superior to another person because of their race. Wow. That is a teaching in critical race theory. You cannot teach that, what are various other ones there. I'm trying to think of some of them. We had a whole shopping list in there.
Now, because we're coming down to the last minute, how can people see some of these documents? I think we've been putting up some contact information, but what's the best
Well,
place?
they can contact me. I'm going to give them my private and business email address, and they can contact me and I can send them information. It's Chris, C-H-R-I-S, at arendlaw, ARENDLAW.com, and I've got a whole bunch of materials I can send them with further explanations, so they can. Then they can always ask me to, if a group gets together and wants to learn more, they can always ask me to come down and give a lecture, as I've been doing. About all I ask for is gas money nowadays, but that's the way I like to do it.
I really appreciate what you are doing, and I think it's a template for other school districts and other parents. I think it also shows that people with backbone can stand up to the crazy theories that are going around.
It takes a little bit of backbone. You can't melt into a puddle when someone calls you a racist.
No, I just remind them that my great-great-grandparents were part of the Ripon Society, and that brought about the Republican Party that never was racist, ever. It isn't today.
Yep.
So